Thank you for tuning into another episode of G.E.N Talks, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect youth to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussions. I'm your host, Melissa.
And I'm Desiree, and today we had the pleasure of talking with Raffi Wartanian. Raffi is a writer, musician, and educator who currently teaches writing at UCLA. His essays have appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Review of Book, to name a few. He is the recipient of many grants. He also leads workshops with incarcerated writers at Rikers Jail, which inspired him to start Letters for Peace. As a musician, his latest work of instrumental compositions, Critical Distance, was recognized as absolutely fresh, poignant, and sophisticated. We hope you enjoyed the interview.
Thank you, Raffi, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
So to start off the interview, Raffi, if you could tell us a bit more on how you found your passion for writing.
Well, I've always had a passion for expression and performance and creativity and art, whether it was through music. My aunt was a classical pianist, so I got to hear some really interesting music growing up. And then I had an uncle who played the accordion. My older brother and older sister, they studied piano and guitar, and I followed in their footsteps. So I was always attracted to art and creativity and expression, and also theater. You know, in middle school, high school, and college, I was involved in a lot of theater and productions. Those things kind of were my foundation for expression, creativity, and performance. And I don't think it wasn't until I went to college, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. So, all of these things were happening in Baltimore. It wasn't until I got to college that I started to think a little bit more seriously about writing. But even in college, it was still a lot of like music, theater, writing, and writing was taking on so many different forms. Writing essays, writing sketch comedy, because I was in a sketch comedy group, trying to write plays, writing fundraising letters because I was like part of student groups that were doing fundraising initiatives, and we bicycled across America, which is why I have that map on the wall. It's like I have the towns we stopped in. So writing fundraising letters and just doing a lot of things that required, communication and expression. And as I was saying all this, I had a memory to elementary school when I just recall like having a rubber band and imagining like what would happen if I flung the rubber band to the ceiling and then it fell and it landed on someone's table and like knocked over their cup, and then water spilled onto their clothes, and then that clothes had to be cleaned at their parents' home, and then the laundry machine broke, and then so there was this I guess just imagining like all of this cause and effect stuff happening. So I think these things start to happen and percolate before we are aware of them. And then later on, when we look back, we find those moments. So that's one that jumped out to me. But it was in college where I think I was doing a lot more writing, and then and then after college, just continuing to try to write and tell stories. And I started to understand then, and something I still believe now, that a story has a way that it wants to be told, and that all I'm trying to do is find the right medium for that story to be told. So for example, if something is very abstract, I might write a poem. If something transcends language, then I might write music. If I want to get into like some critical arguments and like critical thought, I might write an essay. If the story is driven by characters who are in dialogue with each other, I might try to write a play. So just, I was trying to be open to the different ways stories want to be told, rather than saying, you know, because I tried the other approach, which was like, I'm going to become an amazing screenwriter. And so all I'm going to do is write screenplays. Well, I tried that, you know, but it felt very inauthentic to me. I'm not saying it's a wrong approach. I think there's a lot of people it works for, but for me, it didn't feel like the right approach or method. And so I just, over time, just tried to explore and experiment with a lot of different modalities, and I still try to do that. So it's been a journey of many different mediums and trying to figure out, you know, how they are most effective to express different stories and narratives, and to, you know, give myself permission to try and to fail and to struggle, and, you know, and then to kind of try to persevere and rise up from there.
You mentioned theater and like comedy sketching. Did you ever, I mean, did you always want to be kind of maybe in the behind the scenes of that? Like, did you ever think about being like an actor, or, you know, just like being in front of the camera, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I've after, you know, during and after college, I was acting on the stage quite a bit. I loved it very much. I worked with Golden Thread Productions in San Francisco after college, for example. And then I moved back to the East Coast, where I'm from, and I was in New York City for a while, involved with some, you know, doing some readings, and with a group of writers and actors who would workshop their material. And so it's something I've always loved, and I still love it. And I'm always kind of curious and thinking about how I might get back into it. But I think I found that like skills in theater and comedy infuse themselves into other things I'm working on. So like if I'm writing a poem or if I'm writing an essay, there might be some like ironic, satirical, comedic insight that I can infuse into an essay I'm trying to write. Or when I'm teaching, my training as an actor has helped me immensely in teaching, because you know, there's a part of acting, there's a part of teaching that is, of course, a performance. It's very theatrical. And I would argue that increasingly especially our digital identities are very performative. And, you know, so I think the way an actor is trained to be aware of that, to maintain some kind of authenticity, even within the seemingly inauthentic world of the story. Like the training I received in acting, like, you know, from the methods developed by Stanislavski and then popularized in America by like Meisner and, you know, Uta Hagen and others, you know, those are about authenticity at the end of the day. Even if something is performative, and performative doesn't have to mean inauthentic. Performative can mean, performative, I think at its best can mean present, like being very present, being in the moment, and being so engaged that we lose, you know, everything else kind of falls away, and we're really present with whatever it is that we're doing. So I try to keep the lessons and the principles alive in whatever I'm doing, even if I'm not like in a production right now, which, you know, which is completely fine. I am in the production of life. And, and yeah, I have this little icon here on my desk. It says, "May the life you live be your greatest work of art." So I try to, you know, take that to heart. And so yeah, that great question. Thank you.
So how did this passion in writing translate to you then teaching at UCLA?
I'd say the writing and the teaching sort of were in simultaneous development, but in different threads, and they kind of came together over time. With teaching, I've been teaching on and off for a long time in a lot of different subjects. I would when I was in high school, I would do like informal music lessons with my friends. Like a friend's trying to learn guitar, they're like, oh, come on over, let's play, let's talk about some, like, can you show me some chords? Can you show me some scales? So I would sit down with friends and, you know, share with them what I had learned from my teachers. And then in college, I was doing some tutoring and like SAT prep. So there I started to develop some teaching skills that, you know, that I still use today. Like, I think there I learned a lot about just like the room, you know, the energy of the room and getting people involved and engaged. After college, I worked at a time at a refugee resettlement center in Baltimore, my hometown, at the International Rescue Committee, which I know also has they also have a office in Glendale. And there I was, you know, there I managed like the volunteer and internship program, and I also managed a resettlement shop. But, you know, sometimes I would teach an English language class with newly arrived refugees from Iraq, Burma, Bhutan, Eritrea, Congo. So there was that. There was also, you know, my parents immigrated from Lebanon. So I think like a lot of families who have immigrated recently, kids are often involved with, there's this like exchange of ideas and teaching, like the parents teach their children about, you know, their culture and customs, and then the other way around, like the kids who are the first generation in the new place may often be teaching their parents certain things, whether it pertains to culture, language, or in our specific day and age, technology. You know, we're all like the at-home IT specialists kind of thing. So then after the resettlement center, I spent some time in Armenia doing a Fulbright research fellowship. And during that time, I was teaching a writing class. It was a screenwriting class. And I had also previously taught English and computer skills in Armenia during college. And yeah, so then after Armenia, I was in New York City, and there I was teaching bicycle riding with an organization called Bike New York. So teaching bicycle riding, and then after that, I was in Southern California. I taught at a pre-K through 12 Armenian school in Canoga Park. There I taught US history to 8th graders. And I was also doing some administration work. Then I was back in New York, and then I started teaching writing workshops at Rikers Island Jail, and then at the Manhattan VA. So I was working with incarcerated writers and veteran writers. And then that was where, and I was doing that during my Master of Fine Arts degree. And after I completed the 2 years of coursework, I received a 2-year teaching fellowship where I did my master's at Columbia University to teach undergraduate writing to freshmen for 2 years. And that was an amazing program to learn the sort of the mechanics, the art, the pedagogy of teaching rhetoric and composition, which is like, you know, freshmen are often required as a general education requirement to take an essay writing class. And this is done nationwide. And this has been done for thousands of years, because the tradition of rhetoric is very old, and it sort of emerged with the rise of democracy, because, you know, democracy replaced the system where, you know, autocrats and dictators could just say whatever they wanted, and that's what happened. But in democracy, there was an important skill, which was you need to convince people that your ideas are the best ideas. And so the art of rhetoric was developed and refined and has been practiced for a very long time. And so people have been trained in this tradition. And of course, that's why it's so important and continues to be a requirement today. So I learned a lot about what it means to teach, you know, rhetoric and composition, specifically like writing different styles of argumentative essays, like a rhetorical analysis, a conversation essay, research essay, opinion essays, and then my background is in like creative nonfiction. So I always have an interest in like hybrid approaches. So there, I did 2 years, a 2-year contract. It was started in fall of 2019. The pandemic hit, everyone was on Zoom. We knew that we wanted to start a family with my partners. So we were, and her parents are in Southern California. So we were hoping to come here. So we ended up coming here in early 2021 as my contract in New York was reaching its conclusion and everything was online teaching anyways. So I finished that. I was applying for jobs. Baby was born, and then I got very, very fortunate to receive this position teaching full-time at UCLA. It's the undergrad, it's called UCLA Writing Programs, and it's the freshman writing class that all freshmen from all disciplines take, and it's rhetoric and composition, so as I described. And so the passion for teaching was cultivated from like a passion. So that's sort of how the things kind of converged. The passion for teaching really is a passion for service. I just care a lot about trying to just support other people. So teaching is just a great way to do that. And it's just a great way to see other people develop, grow. And the great thing about, the approach to teaching that I try to practice is that I'm trying to learn as much from the students as they're learning from me. And I try to create like a horizontal structure where students are positioned to be the generators of knowledge. I am not the one who is dictating and preaching the gospel of great writing. Rather, I am trying to join the writers and thinkers in the room on a journey of discovery and using some of the core principles and concepts of rhetoric to guide that journey. So that's the passion for teaching. And for writing, it's what I love about writing is the opportunity and the ability to express something authentic and sincere. And I think it's one of the few disciplines where you can really convey something from my heart to your heart with very minimal like middlemen, so to speak. Like it's just straight from me to you, like from the writer to the reader. If I made a film, for example, like there would be a much more collaboration, much more layers and levels of interpretation and shifting, which is totally wonderful and fine. But for me, the passion of writing has emerged from feeling conviction to say something about specific topics that I've tried to explore over time. So that's how kind of the passion for writing translated to teaching at UCLA.
And you mentioned Rikers Island. I kind of want to go back and touch upon that. And if you could talk a little bit more about that experience and how did that opportunity arise?
Yeah, so at Rikers Island, the opportunity was a group of volunteer teachers in my graduate department. And so, as someone who's cared about service and trying to go into step outside my comfort zone, I find that trying to step outside my comfort zone has always, more often than not, yielded very positive results. It's helped me expand my understanding of the world, inspired me to grow. And so I thought, let me apply for that because this is something that is outside my comfort zone. And this is something that, you hear a lot. I had heard a lot about, the prison industrial complex and how people are being excessively incarcerated. And that I had come across people in my journey who had done some work within different jails and prisons. And I know that, I had an actor friend who I'd worked with in San Francisco who was doing stuff, doing Shakespeare in a prison in the Bay Area. And so when I heard about this, I thought, let me give it a try, let me apply. So I did, and they accepted me. And the experience of teaching there was very eye-opening. You know, it's one of those things where you only can really understand a place once you're there. Like, it's one thing to read about a jail and a prison, or to like pontificate about the prison industrial complex, but it's something else to go into the system, to go into the place and to see how does it work, what are the mechanics, who are the people. You know, you see the good, you see the bad, you see everything in between. You see workers for the Department of Corrections. They're trying to do their best. Some of them are trying to do their best. Others might benefit from more training. You see the layer of bureaucracy, where it's like, if you even want to be allowed to get to the jail, there's a lot of paperwork and training and things you have to go through to even have that permission to go. So there are those obstacles. And then you meet the other teachers who are not just teaching writing, but it's like, oh, I'm here to teach a yoga class. I'm here to teach a music class. There are increasing numbers of universities, colleges who are going in to do degree granting programs. I believe that I have a colleague at UCLA, I think, who's involved with this here at the Victorville, I think the Victorville prisons. And so then once you're in the classroom, it's really like any writing class. I mean, obviously you're in a jail, that's different, but like the mechanics of teaching, it's like, what are we, like, you going in with a game plan? It's like, okay, here's our game plan for today. Here's what we're going to work on, and really making sure that there's time to talk, generate ideas, write, and share. And then thinking about next steps, like, how can this writing, you know, what do you want to do with your writing? What are your goals? And the beautiful thing about teaching in a place like Rikers Island, I learned, was that the writers there are very, very motivated to be there, because this is it's like an escape from what they're dealing with. It's an opportunity for their imaginations to explore and express, and to also connect with people from the outside. And, you know, and part of our responsibility is to try to find bridges and pathways to like bring in resources, whether it's like a degree granting program, or I know Penn America, this nonprofit organization, has like a whole division dedicated to incarcerated writers and amplifying their voices. There's also like letter exchange programs. So I just learned a lot about the spirit of the writers who are there, the urgency and desire they have, the need for teachers to go there and to share their knowledge, and for the pathways to be built from inside the walls to outside the walls, and also to think about the broader like bureaucratic ecosystem of the guards and the Department of Corrections, and so I learned a lot, and it really like informed me and inspired me to think about writing as a way to escape, let's say, trauma and pain. Not escape in the sense of denial or like ignoring, but escape in the sense of like, where is the freedom? Like, can I find freedom even inside these four walls? And that's where that's why people like Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela wrote some of their most amazing work inside of a prison or a jail. Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail, for example. So I learned a lot, and grateful for that experience.
So this later translated into you being inspired to start Letters of Peace. Could you talk a little bit more about what exactly Letters of Peace is?
Yes. So let me begin at the end. We have a little book. And this book is the culmination of many things. So, and that's a great segue question you asked. And I must express my admiration and appreciation for your preparation in the questions you're both asking, because it's clear from what you're asking that you've done research and like you care about the conceptual movement of the conversation and understanding like the interview subjects. So thank you for that. Letters for Peace was directly emerged from Rikers Island teaching for me. Basically, while I was teaching at Rikers Island and having all of these insights about writing and writing workshops as a way for like freedom, liberation, peace, and the giving voice to people who are being silenced by violent governmental systems or like systems of government that silence people. I couldn't help but think about Armenia, of course, where I'm Armenian. My family, my grandparents and great-grandparents are Armenian genocide survivors. They came to Lebanon, and that's where my parents were born. And then my parents immigrated to Baltimore in the 1970s, where my father got work. So our path didn't go through Armenia, but I had an opportunity to go to Armenia while I was in college. And then I'd mentioned the Fulbright Research Fellowship. And in both cases, I had become, Armenia is a small country. It's the size of Maryland, little under 3 million people. So one of the big things about Armenia is that about 90% of its borders are closed, and with Turkey to the west and Azerbaijan to the east. And that means the only open borders are with Georgia to the north and Iran in the south. So, and then of course, on top of that, when I went to Armenia, the conflict with Azerbaijan had been, so first time I went was in 2007, and then I went in 2012 through 2013, and then I was back in, I think, 2016, 2018, 2019. So several times in the past decade or so. And there is an acute awareness that even as you're driving south, like, the borders are closed. You can see Azerbaijan over there. There are military positions on those hills. That's why there's like a big hill next to this road so that the cars are protected as you're driving. So you're like very aware that you're in this militarized area and that the conflict may not be active, at least when I went. Now it has been active. We can talk about that later. But so you're acutely aware that there's this active militarized situation and that affects people's lives. And there's, there was sporadic fighting and shelling here and there, and flare-ups of fighting over time, notably in 2016. So when I was teaching at Rikers Island, there was an organization called Projects for Peace that was looking for proposals to go somewhere in the world to do a program that somehow promotes peace. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have writing workshops with Armenian and Azerbaijani youth so that they can do some creative writing and then exchange letters articulating an interest and desire for conflict transformation. And we settled on that word conflict transformation because peace can sometimes be very abstract, and also like, I don't know, but conflict transformation can feel a bit more of an attainable thing. It's a subtle rhetorical distinction, but maybe an important one. So I wrote the proposal, I sent it, they accepted it. And the proposal was, we're going to do a workshop in Armenia and a workshop in Azerbaijan. And it's going to mix creative writing and conflict transformation. It's going to be at that intersection. And so a lot of the types of, like, I think being at Rikers Island gave me the confidence to say that, okay, this kind of thing can work. Let's think about it in a different context. So our proposal was accepted. We developed a curriculum. I was very fortunate to find a project partner in Azerbaijan. And so He led the workshops there. I led the workshops in Armenia, and that was in 2018. And so in the first year, our Armenia workshop started the process. We did 1 week of the workshop, and it resulted in students writing letters. Those letters were translated, they were written in Armenian, they were translated into English and Azerbaijani Turkish. The letters were digitally sent to our project partner, and then he ran the curriculum there, and then they received the letters that had been written in Armenia, and then they wrote responses, and we put those online. So that went well. The first year went well, and then we got a new round of funding from the Eurasia Partnership Foundation to do another round the following year in 2019. So in 2019, we did 2 workshops in Armenia and 2 workshops in Azerbaijan, and each workshop was 2 weeks long. And we alternated the sequencing so that it was workshop 1 in Armenia sent letters to workshop 2 in Azerbaijan, and then they wrote responses. And then workshop 3 in Azerbaijan wrote letters that were sent to workshop number 4 in Armenia, and they wrote responses, so that it was a bit balanced in terms of who initiated the letters and who responded. And then we were from the previous year, we had the sort of translation infrastructure in place, so we were able to build on that. So in total, between 2018 and 2019, we had, I believe it was 54 writers. And so, yeah, then we started compiling it into a book, and then the pandemic hit. And so that kind of really undermined our capacity to keep the programming going in the summer of 2020. Then in September 2020, Azerbaijan invaded the Republic of Artsakh, also referred to as Nagorno-Karabakh. And this was, I believe it was from late September to early November. I think it was 44 days. It was very devastating, and it really set back the prospects and hopes for conflict transformation programming. And then a few weeks ago, once again, so this time Azerbaijan invaded the Republic of Armenia itself. So Republic of Artsakh is a disputed indigenous self-proclaimed republic. Republic of Armenia is an internationally recognized republic. So Azerbaijan invaded. It was, I believe, 2 days, and it appears the ceasefire was brokered by the US, but who's the peacekeeping force in the South Caucasus right now? Russia. So we have, there are layers of problems we can talk about later, but this is all at the governmental military level, right? So the whole point of Letters for Peace was to say and to propose that there are people who are not internalizing the violent, militarized rhetoric that is coming from these government and military people. So we wanted to try to amplify voices that were being silenced. And that was the common thread from Rikers Island. It's there's a lot of people in Armenia and in Azerbaijan who do not want war. Mm. We need to hear from these people and see what they have to say, because all we hear about in the mainstream media, if we even hear anything, because it's so dramatically underreported, but if we do hear anything about the region, generally it's about war, fighting, conflict, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's not the whole story. That's not the reality. There's so much more. And the great thing about this book and the letters here is that those aspirations and those on the ground human experiences and conditions and reflections are expressed. And I think you get a sense for what people really think, rather than what they're told to internalize by their governments. And the last thing I'll say is that there is an important distinction to identify here when we're talking about Armenia and Azerbaijan. Armenia is a democracy that has emerged from a semi-authoritarian system, but it is moving, but it has a vote. People vote. The governments change when people want different people in power, and so Armenia is struggling a lot right now, but it is a democracy. Azerbaijan is a dictatorship. It has been ruled by the same person for the last 20 years, like Russia and Turkey, and his father was in power for decades before him. So I'm biased as an Armenian, like there's no denying I have a bias, but also like just objectively speaking, I can also say that the reason why it is so remarkable that people in Azerbaijan participated in this is because there is a lot of silencing and censorship by the dictatorship that seeks to silence any sort of political opposition or civil society development. So most recently, people are being put into jail if they speak out against the government's military activities. So it's a commentary more on the government more so than the people. And I believe that there's a lot of people in Azerbaijan who want peace, who don't want this fighting. But unfortunately, when you're in such an oppressive system, there's a lot of censorship that either happens by the government or by people who are afraid and do self-censorship. So that has been something we've had to navigate, but we found a way forward, and that's how we got to Letters for Peace. Right now, we're kind of distributing the books. So we've sent books to libraries in Glendale, Jerusalem, Warsaw, Poland, London, New York, and it's on the website lettersforpeace.org. There's like a full list there. But anyways, so that's been the journey of Letters for Peace. We haven't been able to keep up the workshops, but for now we're trying to focus on distributing the book and hoping that sort of, because it's not about Letters for Peace, right? Letters for Peace is just one part of the conflict transformation process. So it's like if the 54 people who participated or anyone who's aware of what happened can gain some type of inspiration and come up with their own project, or even just a shift in their perspective, then that's a victory. And that is something that moves the ball forward. And that's also like part of the greater global hope for less militarization and more diplomacy.
And I kind of want to touch upon, it seems like acts of service and giving back are big themes in your life. Where do you think this, itch for doing something for your community, or just, helping someone out, whether that be through writing or teaching, where did that come from?
I think like a lot of things, it probably starts with family for me. So, growing up, we would visit Lebanon quite a bit to see my relatives. And, we were going there in the final years of the Civil War and then in the aftermath of the Civil War in Lebanon, which lasted from 1975 to 1990. And even then, like I was very aware of the difference between like the United States and Lebanon. And, there were a lot of things I saw there, just like there's the image I just can't forget. It's this beggar who had no limbs, no arms, no legs, and he's sitting in the street with a cup in his teeth asking for money. And we're just like walking down the street going to the grocery store. Would have never seen that in Baltimore County, where I'm from. Now I understand that happens in America. It's just I was kind of protected from it and privileged to not have to see it in America, but we would go to Lebanon and there it was. So I think from an early age, I had an acute awareness of poverty and suffering and war and things like that, you know, I had a friend recently who went on a family trip to Mexico. And I remember our family trip, the one time we went on a family trip to Acapulco, and my dad was like he put us in a taxi, we all got in together, and he told the taxi driver, he said, take us to the real Acapulco. And the driver like took us away from all the hotels and resorts and took us into like the real Acapulco. And again, just a lot of poverty, and really a striking encounter with that. So I'd say from then I was really just aware of these disparities. And my father really came from, you know, his parents survived the genocide, and then they had 8 or 9 children. My father was the youngest of 8 or 9 children, and his father was a shoemaker, and his mother raised the kids. So they didn't have much money. And so my dad ultimately went to Soviet Armenia when Armenia was a Soviet satellite, and he got a free education there. And he always was grateful for that and trying to give back to, you know, the people who made it possible for him to get an education, whether it was in Armenia or Lebanon. So I'd say definitely from my parents is where it started. In high school, I was very lucky to go to a Jesuit high school, and there, you know, service is very central to the spirit of education. So we went on some service trips that were very impactful for me. One of them was the summer of my leading into my junior year. And we went to the eastern shore of Maryland at a Benedictine monastery, where they run a school for youth with who have very like severe and pronounced birth defects and cognitive impairment. So, you know, working with like young adults on how to write their name or brush their teeth was very, it just really put into perspective like the privilege and gift of having health, and also just the joy of being able to connect with them and to just be in the moment with them. And it's like when you're in the moment with them, like there's this thing that happens where it's like there's the initial shock of the disparity, but then the closer you get to that person, that the disparity kind of disappears when you go into the moment with them and you're doing something with them, writing down our name, brushing our teeth, swinging on a swing set, like whatever it is that we're doing, like those gaps kind of go away. And we find our common ground as humans, regardless of what we may have or not have. So I'd say the service there was really important in high school. And then in college, I just wanted to keep the momentum going. So, I found a local Baptist church that did alternative spring break trips. One was to Jamaica, one was to Costa Rica. And we did, we were working in Jamaica at a school for deaf orphans. So we were like building structures, playing with the youth, just doing that kind of thing. And then in Costa Rica, there was a squatter village, squatters from Nicaragua. This term, I think it means people who just fled Nicaragua. And so this was like a community center that needed to be constructed. So we worked on that. But the biggest service in college was, as I mentioned earlier, the bicycle trip from Baltimore to San Francisco. So we were raising money for cancer research and hospice care for people who are coming into the city of Baltimore to get treatment. And part of that ride was that we each had to raise $4,000 to participate. And the fundraising started in October ahead of the May launch of the ride. And so each month we would go to this hospice center. It was called the American Cancer Society Hope House, or it was a housing run by the American Cancer Society, Hope Lodge. And we would cook meals. So people were there, they were receiving cancer treatments. And so we would cook meals and spend time with them, play, do board games. And as we went on the bike ride, we would meet people nationwide who were dealing with, either they had cancer, they were cancer survivors, or they were caretakers, or they had lost someone to cancer. So just doing those like acts of service, like, again, I was stepping outside my comfort zone. It was uncomfortable to be in some of these situations, but because of being in those situations, my understanding of the world was expanding. My understanding of other people was deepening. The stereotypes that I might have been exposed to about flyover states in middle America was being transformed with real lived experiences. And most of all, I found that, the giving back to others was just like the best. It just felt good. And maybe that's a selfish component of service, but it's like a reciprocal altruism. I mean, it feels good because it's like, I'm not just focused on myself all the time. I'm like connecting to the greater tapestry of human life and human experience.
So you're also a musician, and your latest work of instrumental composition is titled Critical Distance. What was the inspiration behind this piece?
Thank you again for your amazing research and for looking into this stuff. So Critical Distance is my second CD, and my first one is called Pushkin Street. So Pushkin Street was 2013. This is like singer-songwriter stuff. And then Critical Distance, 2019, December 2019, right before the pandemic. So the inspiration, well, I think it connects to this idea of pushing myself outside my comfort zone and trusting that that's where I will grow and get the most out of a process or a project. So I found, with my first album, I loved the singer-songwriter approach, but I was also finding that I was finding it was a bit more intensive with respect to equipment, other people, forming bands, all that kind of thing. So what I wanted to do was make music that was where the instrument was singing. Like, it didn't need to depend, I didn't need to sing. I didn't need a bass player to play a bass line. I didn't need a drummer to provide a sense of rhythm. If I could just somehow capture all of it into an instrumental composition, that would be an opportunity to expand and grow in my musical expression. And I was just finding that in terms of music, that was just the direction I was moving in. Like, I was starting to get into the oud, which is an ancient folk instrument that is the grandfather of the guitar. And I was getting into like fingerstyle guitar with flamenco influence and Armenian folk influence. So I was just trying to hear the songs, hear the music, and write it down. And that's all that it was, just sitting down with the instrument in a quiet place and just developing pieces that express something that cannot be described with words. So it would be hard for me to put words to it, but each piece, has its own character. And I would say that the way I've described it is it's sort of like, well, let me see how I wrote this down here. So it's Armenian folk meets Appalachian bluegrass in a Brooklyn tango bar. And I wrote that because it sort of is a one-liner that describes the intersection of styles, but that was not my agenda when I sat down to write. It was just like, let me just sit down and try to listen to the music and use these instruments as a vessel to express what I'm hearing and then to share it and to record it. So, you know, that was the inspiration to step outside my comfort zone, to create music that I could play anywhere. So whether I'm, you know, playing in a concert hall or playing under a bridge in, you know, in New York City or somewhere in Los Angeles, it's meant to be portable. I can just take out my instrument and start playing. I don't need to plug in an amp and assemble a band, which is a beautiful thing, and I miss it very much. But that was the spirit, and you know, it was challenging in a rewarding way, and I definitely learned and grew a lot as a musician. And of course, like anything else, the greatest pleasure has been to share the music with other people. And also to see how that project is now inspiring the next project. So now the place I'm finding myself as a musician, or the other way I'll put it is the place where the music is taking me is to focus on so Critical Distance was 8 guitar compositions, 1 oud composition, and 1 mandolin. The place the music is now taking me is the oud. And I think what I'm trying to do now is compose oud music for the next album. And you know, so it's a work in progress. I think I'm at about 4 or 5 compositions. I always strive for like double digits, whether it's 10 or 11 pieces. It's just an arbitrary thing that maybe it will end up being 8 or 9. I don't know. But that's where I see it going next, is sort of oud composition. But and the last thing I'll say is the title Critical Distance is a concept from writing. And in writing, critical distance is this idea that in order to write about something, I need some distance between myself and that object of analysis. Because if I'm too close to it, it can be a little bit hard to see it. So having critical distance from a thing allows me to see it from many angles and express it in a way that's a bit more full and complete and dynamic and dimensional. So with the album Critical Distance, I found that this concept characterized the kind of what the music was doing for me. The music was helping me put a critical distance between myself and some of the things that, you know, I was going through as an individual. You know, like any person is dealing with different struggles in their life. So the music was a way to help me process and deal with normal struggles in a way that was like constructive and generative and expressive. And so critical distance is this idea that the music was this tool that allowed for that critical distance. And so I think in the music there is this kind of balance between like dark and light, hope and despair, you know, east and west. So that's the concept of critical distance.
Awesome. Well, before we end, we have some rapid fire questions to ask. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Green.
When are you the happiest?
During and after exercise.
Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Live life one step at a time, and make each step a masterpiece, which is from the Dalai Lama.
If you could have 3 people dead or alive for dinner, who would it be?
Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Paul McCartney.
What is a book that you have recently read or are currently reading that you would recommend?
Silence by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who recently passed away. He has a great quote, something like, this is paraphrasing. He's like, a wave is enlightened when it realizes that it is the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But the book is called Silence.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Raffi. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they could connect with you?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for these incredibly thoughtful and well-researched questions. It's an honor to speak with you. Thank you to Glendale Library Arts and Culture for this programming and all of the great programming. We're planning to check out a concert put on by GLAC this Saturday afternoon. So shout out to GLAC for all the amazing work. In terms of future projects and connectivity, I'd say the biggest project right now is like raising our 13-month-old baby, certainly. Besides that, I've got the oud compositions I'm working on. I have various writing projects that are all in different stages of development. And then whenever something is complete and published, I'll try to put a post about it using my website, which is raffijoewartanian.com, and also on social media. My website has like all the links to social media. So I do the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. That would be the response there.
Awesome. Well, thank you once again. We really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you again for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time and for your wonderful questions and for this series, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Did you enjoy this episode? I'm sure you did. Don't forget to follow us on our socials at Facebook and Instagram at MyGlendaleLAC.
And also make sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify or anywhere where you get your podcasts from at TGN Talks. And also make sure to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Glendale Library Arts and Culture, where we post the full episode videos every Friday at 4:30 p.m.